This is Tuesday, May 12th, the meeting of the Legislative Affairs Committee. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the roll, please?
Good evening. The following councilors have logged in and are present at this meeting. Vice President Walsh, Councilor Zarella, Councilor DiNatale, Councilor Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The public had been advised to contact the clerk's office by noon today regarding any comments, to my knowledge at this point, none have been brought forward. So we'll begin the meeting. There are two items on this evening's agenda. The first one is 02820, Councillor Paul Boschman, to amend Chapter 16958, winter parking ban, to increase the fee from $30 to $60 per day when the winter parking ban is in place. And if there is no objection on the part of the remainder of the committee, I've spoken with Councillor Boschman. The Chief of Police has requested that we hold this until he has had an opportunity to consider it more fully. I spoke with Councillor Boschman. He has no objection if we hold this. So if there's no objection for the rest of the councillors, I would recommend that we do that.
Motion to hold.
Second.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you like to conduct the roll?
Vice President Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Zarella,
Yes.
Councilor DiNatale,
Yes.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The second item on the agenda is 02920. Fitchburg Planning Board to amend the Fitchburg zoning ordinance as part of phase 1 of an ordinance update to make clarification in the table of principal uses as outlined in the petition. It's also referred to a public hearing on May 19th, 2020. At this point in time, I'm going to turn this over to Tom Skowarski. And first of all, I want to congratulate him and actually commend him on the hard work that has gone into this project so far. I know it's been a lot of work, and with everything that's going on right now, it adds an extra layer of work to his plate. So I appreciate that. I would like to, before I turn it over to Tom, I would like to just read, Councillor Schultz had sent a communication, and I'm going to read the communication just so that it's part of the record. And what Councillor Schultz had suggested were two changes. The first one changed marijuana to cannabis throughout the Fitchburg zoning ordinance. Marijuana is a term born of racism. It was a pejorative term that came into use in the 1930s to stoke anti-Mexican sentiment against Mexican immigrants, bringing the plant into the United States. Furthermore, the Massachusetts Control Commission for the plant is called the Cannabis Control Commission and not the Marijuana Control Commission. Number two, since it is my understanding that cannabis is supposed to be regulated like alcohol, allow retail cannabis shops to be located anywhere alcohol retail shops can be located in the city, central business district, neighborhood business district, and commercial district. If our intention is to be business friendly as to the new cannabis retail industry, then we should consider such a change. Sincerely, Bernie Schultz, Ward 1 City Councilor. What I'd like to do is have Mr. Skowarski make his presentation, and then we'll take questions from any of the city councilors, and they can address either the proposed changes by the working group on the zoning for the zoning board changes, or to Mr. Schultz's suggested amendments. So at this point in time, Mr. Skowarski, I believe the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh, and good evening, councillors. Councillor Walsh, thank you for those kind words. And certainly it's been a long effort to see this zoning reform work to fruition. I certainly couldn't do it without the team I've got here with me, both Mike O'Hara, our principal planner, Paula Karen, the chair of the planning board, and of course our great team at BSC, both of which are joining us this evening, Russ Burke and Jeanette Tozer. In addition to that, as I'll outline as we're going through the program here, we have a number of members, two of this committee, Councilors Walsh and Zarella, and a number of other folks involved in our zoning advisory committee that have really helped make this possible. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen here, and I hope it works. Great. So I just want to walk you quickly through the process of these zoning changes. You know, the impetus was the 2017 strategic plan. You know, we outlined in that plan over 180 action items. A number of them are zoning related. And, you know, as a result, in 2019, we brought BSC on to take this effort and, you know, basically work with us as our technical support and consultants to really help craft the changes. We've got a 20+ member advisory committee and a 12-person working group. The working group is largely composed of municipal officials as well as the planning board chair, our chair of legislative affairs, Councilor Walsh, and our chair of property committee, as well as ZBA member, Councilor Zarella. So we've got a two-phase zoning process in front of us. The first phase, which we'll be looking at tonight, is what I would call administrative. And these are things such as removing inconsistencies and errors within our existing zoning, reducing redundancies. A great example of that is we have currently recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. This would seek to remove that and combine them into one. We're also condensing and clarifying where we can. So, you know, the way I think of it, it's as if you're renovating a house, and, you know, before doing that, you want to make sure you have a strong foundation in place to make the larger renovations. And that's kind of what we're doing here with our zoning work, taking care of these smaller administrative changes here in phase one, and then moving on to phase two after this is out of the way, which is those transformative changes. Those are map changes, you know, thinking about which areas we might want to rezone. Looking at major use and dimensional changes. For example, we currently have 7 central business districts and we all treat them alike. When in fact, we all know that John Fitch Highway is different than South Street Corridor, is different than downtown. And I think we want to look at what use changes we might make in each corridor according to what's really appropriate for that area. Another example would be, you know, we have a host of overlay districts, such as our mill conversion overlay, which basically covers all of our industrial districts throughout the city. So this is really an effort to ensure that we are fine-tuning our map, we are fine-tuning our zoning districts, and that, again, will really be phase two, and that will be happening soon. Our team at BSC is already working on that effort, and you know, this is certainly, you know, something they're going to have wrapped up by the end of May. And then we'll be bringing to our advisory committee, and hopefully we'll come to council soon thereafter. So just to give you a quick overview of the phase one changes we're looking at here, just broken down by the area. 181.2, we added a purpose description for all of our districts. For all intents and purposes, this doesn't change anything about the zoning itself. It just helps us better articulate what we want each district to mean. So what does rural residential mean? What does central business district mean? And the thought process there is, as we move to phase two, once we know and can articulate what each district is, we should have a better understanding of how to zone for use and dimension within them. Our use regulations, we wanted to have consistency in our use table across all uses. So our special permit granting authorities, we tried to keep fairly consistent throughout the whole table. We tried to create consistently according to the granting authority's role. So in other words, looking at things that the planning board should take on, which are more planning and long-term, you know, larger sites in nature. And I've got a 3-year-old running circles around me right now. But the ZBA then would take on some of those more appropriate projects for them as a special permit granting authority. And we've been working to slowly phase out city council as a special permit granting authority, which is really not generally the intent of, you know, they're not the city council is not a land use body. So, you know, that's something the council's been doing over the last few years. The last time we saw an example of that was with the abandonment ordinance, where, you know, I know those all to reinstate the 2-year abandonment clause. All of those items used to go in front of city council. Now they go in front of ZBA. We did a little bit more of that here. with amusement facilities and commercial recreation, for example. Both of those were a city council item, and now they've been moved to planning board, which is really the appropriate land use body or something like that. We changed a couple things, FSC to FSU and CNA to commercial. That was just a change in vocabulary. And we condensed a few uses like a contractor's yard and a construction yard. For all intents and purposes, they're the same thing, and now they are in our use table. Dimensional regulations, we incorporated the infill provisions from planning board's rules and regulations. We had a situation where planning board had their internal rules and regulations that governed how they looked at infill development. Those were not actually reflected in our ordinance, and we are sending mixed signals to the development community where they would say, oh, I can build here. It says so within the zoning ordinance, but if the rules and regulations of the planning board prohibit it, there's no sense in sending those mixed signals. We added a lot shape formula to prevent irregular lots. And we clarified definitions where we needed. The discontinuance and abandonment, 181.356, we clarified what abandonment exactly means. I know that was an issue among the development community. Residential on Main Street, 181.426, we just moved it to the proper section. We didn't change anything functionally about allowing residential in the upper stories by right. The parking regulations, we decreased the stall length to 18 feet from 18.5, and it really just conforms with standard guidelines of parking lot development. 181.53 signs, we made a number of changes. Basically, there's a case known as Reed versus Gilbert, which basically stated that all sign regulations need to be content neutral. You can't regulate what the actual content is within a sign without falling foul of First Amendment. And these changes made us conform to our requirements according to Reed versus Gilbert. 181.64 marijuana, we combined medical and non-medical and consolidated those and made sure that we still kept room to follow all the relevant MGLs that govern marijuana law in the state. 181.7, our special residential regulations, we added a minimum lot size for flexible development districts. We moved certain items like accessory apartments and home occupations to 181.7 from other areas. Again, functionally, no change, just reorganizing the ordinance. And we clarified boarding and lodging houses to align with the new process that was developed in part by this Legislative Affairs Committee. 181.84, the PDDs, Planned Development Districts, that's a rarely used component of our zoning. It's, the best way I can explain it really is it's choose your own zoning district. And this is something we've had for quite some time, but we really beefed up the requirements for what an acceptable application would be for something like this to ensure that if we do get an application using this very obscure component of our zoning, it's clear to the developer what's expected before they can just say, I want to create my own development district within this. 181.87, we incorporated the newly approved 40R ordinance. Again, functionally nothing different. We moved it within the organizational structure of our ordinance. 181.91, definitions. We clarified and consolidated terms, and we added a few definitions, the ones you see here. And then I know I'm going through a lot, by the way, and I'm just sort of aiming to give you a quick overview here. Please, when we're finished, we'll have plenty of time and I can stop and walk you through along with our consultants and Mike, any particular questions you might have here. And then lastly, we made a number of changes that I can really best term the zoning wish list. So over the last year and a half, as we've known that we were going to have a zoning reform effort in the pipeline, as we had different issues of inconsistencies and different inaccuracies pointed out in the zoning by our building commissioner, he would send an email to Mike O'Hara and myself noting, hey, this is something we should really look at in phase one. And we compiled that list of changes and we took those into consideration and made a number of those adjustments in these phase 1 changes. And then finally, I sent a memo on April 3rd and didn't make the changes in the ordinance themselves because everything you're seeing in front of you with your red line and your clean version of changes are all changes that were recommended by the planning board and voted on by the planning board. I wanted to make clear that what you're seeing in this April 3rd memo is strictly coming from my department, certainly with the guidance of the planning board chair, but it was not voted on per se by the planning board like the other items were here. So the items that were highlighted in that April 3rd memo, most importantly, there was an addition of renewable energy, which aligns with the work that DPW Wastewater has been doing with the West plant. They've been doing some great work looking for adaptive reuse of that plant that's long been dormant and using it for renewable energy purposes. It's currently out for an RFEI, or request for expressions of interest. And one of the things we've heard from the development community that, they're looking at utilizing that plant for anaerobic digestion, basically converting waste into energy. And while our zoning likely could make room for it in its existing configuration, this helps clarify that this is indeed a use that would be an acceptable use in an industrial district. And certainly would be a use far less intense than what used to be there. Then there are a few smaller changes and primarily typos and consistency issues, and they're really all outlined in the memo, and happy to answer any specifics as we come to them. But before I do, I just want to again recap in terms of next steps. Phase 2, BSC will be wrapping up their phase 2 draft at the end of May. We'll be making changes according to the Economic Development Strategic Plan. Again, these are the larger transformative changes as opposed to these being sort of smaller and more administrative in nature. We would then aim to bring those changes to our advisory group, hopefully in June at some point, but I'm saying well appropriate here because of the caveat of whenever it's appropriate to bring together a group of people, and maybe we'll end up doing it electronically. But sometime in the summer, and then we'll look to draft those changes with the working group and submit phase 2 changes to council in summer 2020. And I think that timeline is also important to note, just as we're thinking about making these phase 1 changes, we don't need to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We don't have to solve for everything today, but we will have later in the summer another opportunity to look back at the zoning work and really finalize things in that phase 2 effort. So at that, I'll stop for questions. I know we just went through a lot here. I'll turn off my screen sharing as well.
There you go. Okay. I think that Councilor Zarella is the first person who would like to speak. And Councilor Zarella, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Skorowski, for your presentation. If other councilors have questions, please let me know. But Councilor Zarella, you're up first.
So thank you. First, I'd just like to reiterate, as I've said in the past, that I'm very glad we're doing this. It's been badly needed for a very long time. And even just this phase 1 is going to make things so much simpler on the zoning board. And I hope on the planning board as well. The part about the descriptive definitions of the various zones is going to also, in addition to guiding future zoning rewrites, it'll also be helpful for the boards, because when we're making a discretionary decision about whether a given proposed use fits well in the area, we need to know what the primary purpose of that area is. If we're looking at a commercial development next to a residential house, it makes a difference whether it's in a commercial district or a residential district, which properties' interests we give more deference to, and so forth. And so knowing exactly what sort of character we're looking for in each zoning district will be very helpful. Also, Tom, did the April 3rd memo come from your email or from some other email? I'm having difficulty finding it.
So it came, there was an original email sent and then a subsequent email followed it. I could also walk the group through the changes right now. Basically the bulk of them are requested by the planning board chair that I would term them really Scribner's errors. Mm-hmm. And then if it's appropriate, if no one else received it, I could walk through them. I don't think there's anything objectionable in the memo.
I really doubt there is, but I would appreciate it if we could walk through it briefly if no one objects, because I haven't been able to find it over the last month, and I wouldn't really want to vote on something I haven't seen, even if I trust you guys to have done a very good job with it.
Of course. So
Tom, if you want to go ahead and review those changes, I thought they were part of the packet, but I could be incorrect.
I'll try to
be wrong too.
move through them briefly. So it's also tough to see what, I guess, the proper view here, because I'm seeing a lot of your faces instead of what's on the memo. But essentially, the renewable energies addition here added renewable or alternative energy, renewable or alternative fuels, research, development, or manufacturing facilities to the table of principal uses and made it allowable in the I district with a special permit from the planning board. And then in addition to adding it to the table, we added it to the definition section as well. And then there were a couple changes that were originally, we moved a lot of things. We said, oh, we'll do that in phase 2. Oh, we'll do that in phase 2. And given that we had a much longer lag between phase 1 and 2 than we anticipated, we just took a couple of these on. In the table of principal uses, hospitals, we changed it to no in residential districts because it's just functionally, we're not going to see that happen. Nursing homes, we wanted to match what was in the use table for assisted living because they should really functionally share those same characteristics. And research and testing, we added to yes in the the limited industrial district, because we felt like that was something we wanted to encourage, not discourage. And then lastly, there's a section here, 181.946, on lapse of a permit, a special permit granted, basically substantial use thereof or construction thereunder has not begun and continued without interruption except for good cause up to 24 months. So this basically just accounts for projects that, often are the problem projects that we see both in planning board and ZBA and otherwise, that they're approved and then they're just sitting there for years and years and years. And this clause basically helps to close a bit of a loophole there for a project to continue indefinitely, where a project could start and then not ever continue after that, and they could say, well, we started, so we fall under this clause. And then honestly, the rest of them are things that are very just they're typos, basically. I review each in detail, but removing an asterisk. This is actually one that this reflected a change that was agreed to by the planning board, and that's already existing, having commercial recreation as a no in rural residential. I think it was added to as a yes by mistake, but it didn't actually reflect the planning board's intent. Swimming pools, 6 feet from any front, side, or rear lot line and not within the front yard setback. Councilor Zarella, you might recall this is something that was discussed in the zoning working group, but didn't make its way in the end. Here's another typo. Here's another typo. And I just outlined where there's just a couple words added here and there that are all, again, this was a typo, and it's just reverting back to its original characteristics for 181-7231. No functional change there. And then here, there's a reference to an amendment, and we removed all those references throughout. So our zoning no longer looks like a Band-Aid that you see exactly every time a fix or an amendment has been made. All those were striked out of this reform. So we were just being consistent there. And that's essentially it. I can stay on this for a moment, but as soon as I hear word, I'll take off the share.
I think if everyone is satisfied with that, I think we can probably take that down. Yes?
I'm good. Thank you.
Councilor Zarella, you had the floor previous to this, and I will give the floor back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for going through that, Tom. I am pleased with the changes. I like what's been tweaked, and again, I'm sorry, I may have just missed it somewhere, but I do appreciate you going through it. So the last thing I wanted to address was just, well, no, I'll hold off on that. So I'm all set. I think this is a good work product, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with it.
Councilor Zarella, you had mentioned earlier something with regard to the suggested changes by Councilor Schultz. Did you want to address those at this point, or is that?
I was thinking I would wait until Councilor Schultz had a chance to address them and
okay.
Comment afterwards.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions? Any other councilors? Councilor Schultz, did you want to ask your question?
You want me to address my my message that I sent, the amendments I sent?
Please.
Okay. Well, I just you know, as I commented on the changing the term marijuana to cannabis, I think it would be I mean, cannabis is the technical scientific term for the plant. I think it would be something that would be warranted, given, as I said in my letter, that it's the Cannabis Control Commission. It's not the Marijuana Control Commission, and I think that's probably the reason. The same reason I gave is probably the reason why they named it the Cannabis Control Commission. And then the other item, I just thought that looking at the what is called the Table of Principal Use Regulations, that I guess the liquor stores fall under number 10, the retail stores and services not elsewhere set forth, and they all that particular store, the liquor store, is able to locate in the central business district, the neighborhood business district, and of course the commercial district. So I just thought that the cannabis shop should also have that ability. So that's why I put forth that amendment. So I guess Councilor Zarella has something he'd like to say about it. I wasn't able to get in touch with him earlier. I know he just wanted to speak with me about those changes.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Schultz. Councilor Zarella, you may have the floor.
Thank you. And first, I'd just like to extend my apology to my colleague. I wasn't able to take the call because I was just about to hop on the Finance Committee meeting at that point. But I think as to the first point, I'd just like to point out that marijuana is the term used in the state statute, Chapter 94G, all throughout. The Cannabis Control Commission is actually an outlier. It's the only place the state uses the term cannabis rather than marijuana. So while I certainly don't want our laws to give any racially insensitive impression, I think legal drafting is just not the best place to advance any sort of attempt at social reform, because it's important that our legal language tracks the state's legal language so that it's clear that we're acting under and pursuant to the authorizing statute. So I'm sympathetic to the request for amendment, but I would not support it at this time. As for the zoning change, that is actually something that was extensively debated last year when we were initially zoning. And I think that, personally, I think we made the right decision last year, but I think that if we were to entertain a change, the time to do that would be in phase 2 when we're doing all the overhaul of the zoning map itself and of which things are going to be permitted in which districts. The idea of this phase 1 set of changes is for it to be largely the simple clerical consistency type changes so that it's easy to move through the council expeditiously, and then take on the more discrete debates on individual issues during phase 2 as they arise. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with Councillor Zarella. I think that leaving the phrase, the term marijuana in the law is consistent with all of the statutes that pertain to marijuana. I think it just makes sense to leave it as is. And I think too that leaving any change in zoning of marijuana establishments should probably be left until phase 2, if at all. So with that, are there any other questions from the councilors? And any questions for anyone else on the panel? Mr. Skorowski, Mr. O'Hara?
I'd like to comment again, Chairperson Walsh, if I could.
Councilor Schultz, you may go ahead.
Well, I agree with both you and Councilor Zarella that maybe the time for the change from the amendment on allowing the retail cannabis shops to have the same locations as the liquor stores is probably something that would be taken up in phase 2 rather than phase 1. But I just wanted to put it out there so that it could be debated at a later date, and hopefully that debate can ensue again. As for your other comment, though, I still disagree with keeping marijuana as marijuana in our ordinance, because I really think that to be more business friendly to the cannabis industry, I think the marijuana has had it is a pejorative term, and it has been for the last 90 years. And I think we need to get away from that term and to come into the 21st century and use a term that is really the scientific term for the plant, and this is what the Control Commission decided to name themselves, the Cannabis Control Commission, even though all the as the statutes that Councilor Zarella mentioned, they all say marijuana. I think that it would be prudent for us to change that throughout our document. So I still maintain that would be a good change to make. Thank you.
So should I consider that a motion to amend?
Yes,
or
consider that a motion to amend, and hopefully I'll get a second.
Do I have a second? I don't see a second on your motion.
I think Councilor Couture motioned. I'm not sure.
Oh, I don't see it.
Yeah, I'll second.
Oh, okay. All right. I have a motion and second to change the language from marijuana to cannabis. Madam Clerk, would you conduct are there any comments on the motion? Speaking to the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you conduct the roll?
Vice President Walsh,
No.
Counselor Zarella?
No.
Counselor Di Natale?
No. No.
Counselor Kuchar?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
That is 3-2.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Motion to approve the changes, including the April 3rd memo, as outlined in all attached documents.
I have a motion and second to approve the changes to zoning, including the memo of April 3rd.
Speaking on the motion?
Speaking on the motion, Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved with this. And I understand that it's just the first phase, but my legacy knowledge, being here since 2008, this is another matter that has been on the table for many, many years in terms of having to be accomplished. And I know from the previous administration, when I was on the council, there were councilors like former councilor, late councilor Tom Connery, who was very bullish about this. I know former city assessor Tom Caputi was very bullish about this in terms of updating our zoning ordinances, updating our maps, and looking at this through a phased approach. And it never got done. And to me, it wasn't because of money. It was just a big undertaking. And I honestly believe that we have people in positions now that are well poised to take this on, both new people and people who have been here for a while, like Mr. O'Hara, where this is a modernization and a reflection of our changing business climate in the city. And I'm just pleased to see that we're moving forward with something that when I was first a councilor 13 years ago, we kept talking about. And so this is just another piece after 13 years that I've served here that I'm finally seeing some action on it. I just don't want to diminish what's taking place. This is not an easy thing to do, and it's very extensive. And I'm very thrilled to see movement on this. And I'm anxious to see what phase 2 brings. So thank you for those who put this together. And, in a presentation that's only a half hour or 45 minutes, doesn't do justice to the amount of work that's involved with all of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I would like to thank all of the people who have attended this evening. Mr. Burke, Ms. Tozer, Paula Karen is here, Mike O'Hara, as well as Mr. Skorowski. So I want to thank all of them for attending. I don't see any other comments. I have a motion and second. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Vice President Walsh?
Yes.
Counselor Zarella?
Yes.
Counselor Di Natale?
Yes.
Counselor Kuchar?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call vote, please?
Vice President Walsh?
Yes.
Counselor Zarella?
Yes.
Counselor Di Natale?
Yes.
Counselor Kuchar?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all.